is the best way to learn project management? I became an instructor after having worked for 20 years in projects. I was teaching a super intensive course for IBM project managers, middle-aged professionals locked in a campus or a faraway hotel so that they could study and do homework even during the night. During 5 busy days, I probably explained 100 concepts, everything from what a project is to how to use and value. A few years later, I was teaching a class every week, covering all project management knowledge areas, and my students were coming from some of the biggest companies on the planet. Feedbacks were positive, and I got the idea of sending a follow-up email 3 weeks after the end of each class. I asked the students if, as a result of the training, they experienced some changes in their behaviors. The results were disappointing. Most participants didn't bother to answer. The majority of who provided the feedback were reporting that, even if they had tried to apply the ideas presented in the course, the pressures coming from the company's organization forced them to revert to old-style behaviors. However, after each class, I always received a few positive feedbacks. Around 5% of the participants reported significant change of behaviors, and they also supported their answers with impressive real-life examples. It was a shocking way of realizing that people don't learn by attending courses. Reality is that you can only learn by doing. And this is true for all kinds of skills: managing projects, playing guitar, investing in stocks, running marathons, writing novels, or, as I'm doing, creating YouTube videos. The 5% group didn't learn in my class. They learned when they put into practice what we discussed in the class. They had already matured an awareness of the project manager role, and they were just waiting for the right kind of spark to start changing their behavior. My contribution consisted in giving the right input at the right moment, but this input could come from an instructor, from a book, from a conversation, or even from a YouTube video. Surely I can think of books, presentations, and videos that had a huge influence on my professional development. They motivated me to consider a new approach and to put it into practice. Sometimes it was working, sometimes it wasn't, but I always learned something. Does this mean that you can become a project manager by watching this channel? Yes, if you belong to that 5% of viewers who are ready to receive the right spark. How do you know if you are ready? Very simple. If you put into practice some of the ideas you find in my YouTube videos, if you start experimenting, it means you are ready. But don't worry if you don't feel ready. It simply means that you need to look for a different kind of input, and you can continue your treasure search. And this is why I initiated this YouTube channel, the 5% Ready Students. In fact, for a company financing a training program, a student in a class of 20 is clearly a poor return on investment. But for a YouTube channel, 5% of 20 million viewers is 1 million people changing the way they look at projects. I know that today sounds a bit optimistic, but to make my point, I needed big round numbers. Back to my initial question. What's the best way to learn project management? The answer is by managing projects. Find a project and manage it. It doesn't matter the size or the content. In fact, there is a good chance you are already managing projects most of your time. Watch the next video for a simple 5 steps approach to start your project management adventure. It's easy.